You're watching Notepad. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. Our focus for this evening will be on the long-standing issue of how Malaysian women unable to pass their citizenship to their unborn children, assuming that their spouse or partner is not a Malaysian citizen. Here joining us for this evening are two ladies that are actually in the thick of it. Suriani Kempe, the president of Family Frontiers, as well as Rachel Ng, an impacted mother from this issue. Suri, maybe we can talk a little bit more about the issue at hand. But before that, maybe you can touch a little bit more about Family Frontiers. What do you guys do? What do you guys advocate?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having us. So, Family Frontiers, really quickly, is a support group. Well, it's an advocacy group. What we do is we support, we advocate for, and mobilize action towards gender equal citizenship rights and the welfare of binational families, in particular Malaysian women who are unable to confer citizenship to their children born abroad. If they are married to foreigners, and of course there's foreign spouses and children as well. So the issue, I can go into the issue. Um, Really, the issue really is about Malaysian women who are married to foreigners cannot pass on citizenship to their children who are born abroad, um, and that is because um, our federal constitution has a provision on citizenship which is interpreted um, as such, right? So in Malaysia, we are unable to pass on citizenship to our foreign-born children, whereas Malaysian men are able to do that. Malaysia is one of 25 countries in the world where we are unable to pass on, where women are unable to pass on citizenship to their children if they are married to foreigners. And in Southeast Asia, at least, we are one of two countries where women are unable to have that right. And the other country is, of course, Brunei. Now, biasanya ramailah orang terkejut yang dapat tahu kan, dekat Malaysia ni sebenarnya masalah ni dah lama wujud. Sebenarnya sejak merdeka lagi, dan pihak kerajaan telah lama mengakui kesan negatif undang-undang ini ke atas wanita warga negara Malaysia serta anak-anak mereka. Kalau kita tengok pada tahun 2013 hingga tahun 2018, KDN sebenarnya telah menerima 4,112 permohonan dan hanya 142 daripada permohonan ini telah diluluskan. Dan ini bermakna kadar permohonan yang berjaya ataupun success rate dari isu ini sebenarnya cuma 3.4%. Tapi kalau kita tengok tahun lepas sebenarnya success rate dia kosong. Maknanya tiada peluang langsung seorang ibu yang memohon kewarganegaraan di Malaysia ini untuk mendapatkan untuk mendapatkan citizenship untuk anaknya, kewarganegaraan untuk anaknya, untuk berjaya langsung. Just success rate dia cuma kosong. Tiada permohonan yang diluluskan. Dan biasanya ini bermakna bahawa seorang ibu itu terpaksa memohon untuk visa, sama ada student visa ataupun social visit pass untuk anaknya itu tinggal di Malaysia. Dan visa ini mesti diperbaharui sama ada setiap 3 bulan, setiap 6 bulan ataupun setahun, setiap tahun. Dan ini sebenarnya sangatlah susah. Macam kalau orang biasanya, orang yang tak tahu ni dia akan kata, well, tak apalah, apa susahnya pun, you register je lah untuk citizenship, sementara tu you apply untuk visa. Tapi isu dia tak adalah sesenang itu kan. Birokrasi ni memang teruk, dan beban nak ke Putrajaya, nak ke JPN, nak membawa anak tu setiap 3 bulan sangatlah mahal, dan sangat membebankan. Dan sementara tu kita tak tentu sama ada visa tu akan diluluskan. Biasanya kita kena pergi sebulan sebelum visa tu habis, dan tak tentu sama ada anak tu akan menerima visa ke tidak, visa tu diluluskan ke tidak kan. Pernah kita ada satu kes where 5-year-old visa dia dah nak habis, pihak JPN kata anak puan kena keluar daripada Malaysia dah masuk balik ni time COVID, so of course nak masuk balik negara for a foreign born citizen ni memang susah. And it was just impossible. So of course dalam masa yang sama tu mak tu rasa sangat-sangat tension kan, like very anxious, very like what is going to happen to my child kalau dia terpaksa keluar negara.
Yeah, let's focus on a case study here. There is an impacted mother joining us, Rachel Ng. Rachel, let's talk about your story on this issue. How has this impacted the process of you applying for citizenship for your child?
It's, to be honest, that the mental stress that is imposed on not just me, like I believe all the impacted mothers are greatly. It's the worry, the constant worry that we have to go through on a daily basis about what's going to happen to our children, and then also worry about their well-being, whether they're gonna because they know that they are different from the rest of their families in Malaysia, and then if some of the siblings like myself, I have one non-citizen child and one Malaysian child, he knows he's different from his mother and his brother. So that constant worry in his mind, it's going to have an impact on him growing up.
All right, let's talk about your story then. How is your case shaped up right now?
Well, I've waited for 7 years and I've never heard back. I gave birth to my first child in London in 2014, and I applied citizenship in the London High Com in 2015. And at the time that I was told that the process was going to take 2 years, and 2016, the whole family moved back, and I've never heard back. Every time when I call JPN, email them, the answer is always the same. It's pending. You just have to wait. And a few years later, I called and follow up again, and then the stories changed. They told me you have to wait for 6 years. And then now it's 7 years. I still haven't heard anything.
Suri, let's fall back to the court case right now when it comes to the citizenship matter. You've had allies in the parliament regarding the issue. Where does things stand when it comes to the court case, and how is the government reacting to this?
So as you know, Family Frontiers went ahead and filed a court case in December 2020. Family Frontiers, as an organization, consisting of affected mothers, along with 6 affected mothers, then filed a case. And what we wanted in this particular instance was for the Malaysian courts to interpret the provisions on citizenship that I mentioned earlier, alongside Article 8.2 of the Federal Constitution. What is Article 8.2 of the Federal Constitution? It is a provision that disallows discrimination on the basis of gender. And so what we wanted was for the courts to read that provision, which disallows discrimination on the basis of gender, in harmony with the citizenship provisions. And so essentially what that would mean is that if Malaysian fathers are allowed to confer citizenship to their children, regardless of where they're born, then Malaysian mothers should be able to do that as well, right? And so what happened was we filed in December 2020, and the government tried, of course, to have our case dismissed, and the government had argued that our case was vexatious and frivolous. Remeh, kerajaan kata kes kita remeh. Of course, we're thankful that the courts then dismissed this and said, no, these mothers are affected. The court recognizes that there is an apparent discrimination, and therefore we want to hear the case. And so that went on, and as history would have it, on the 9th of September, pihak Mahkamah Tinggi Kuala Lumpur berkata, okay, Malaysian women have the right to confer citizenship. And the reason this was, of course, this brought tears to everybody's eyes. Everybody was so overjoyed because for, like Rachel said earlier again, for a lot of these mothers, this has been like years long in the making. For some mothers, decades long in the waiting and in the making. For me, for example, my case, it's an intergenerational issue. Like the same situation affected my mother, it affected myself and my sister as well with our children. So, so this was, of course, a huge cause for celebration. But what made this High Court decision even more revolutionary was the fact that it didn't apply just to the 6 mothers who were applicants in the case. It applied to all Malaysian women in similar situations. Now that is that was the most amazing thing to hear, because usually when we hear about citizenship cases, you go in one case at a time and you look at the individual circumstances of a case. But in this particular decision, it applied to all Malaysian mothers, and that was fantastic. But of course, sometimes things are too good to be true, because 3 days later, the government appealed the High Court decision, saying, it's the government basically said that it needed to appeal because there was another concurrent High Court decision that conflicted the decision that had been made. But of course, when we looked at the decision that they were referring to, which is a Maisha Suhaila case, it turns out that the details were completely different. In any case, the government appealed the decision, and that is why we're now going back to court at the Court of Appeal, and the hearing will be this 23rd of March. So that's where it's at right now. The government, of course, in the meantime, has also said, we recognize that this citizenship issue discriminates against women, impacts women negatively, and therefore we want to change the federal constitution. But that is a completely separate matter to the court case.
Yeah. Rachel, you seem to be nodding in agreement. You want to add on to this?
Yeah, I mean, if the government wants to change the federal constitution, of course, it's great news, right? But there is a very immediate action that they could take to end the sufferings of all the mothers and children, which is just withdraw the appeal, accept the High Court decision, and then just implement the process. As simple as that. Like, there's no studies needs to be done. Yeah, to me, that there's a much easier way out.
What was the thinking behind the government applying for the appeal? Either of you can take up the answer.
So selama ni kerajaan berkata bahawa wanita sebenarnya tidak, Malaysian women cannot be given the right to confer citizenship sebab it will be because Malaysia doesn't recognize dual citizenship, and therefore the children that Malaysian women have will be a threat to national security. This has been the standard response year in year out dekat parlimen. Macam setiap 2 tahun gitu soalan ni akan keluar dekat parlimen. And itulah jawapan dia, bahawa this is a threat to national security. Tetapi when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, dual citizenship can be acquired not just by women marrying foreigners, but by Malaysian men marrying foreigners. As I said earlier, Malaysia is one of 25 countries where women are not given the right, but the rest of the world, 170 countries thereabouts, give women the right to confer citizenship to their children. So if a Malaysian man marries one of those women, anak tu pun akan dapat dual citizenship.
Yeah, there is also that element where some members of the government right now, including Azalina and her colleagues, are championing for the cause of this. Where does the discrepancy lie when it comes to governmental stance and the members of the opposition on behalf of the government?
So the interesting thing, thanks for pointing that out, because the interesting thing is really that Malaysian, when the High Court decision was issued, ramai sebenarnya, the response was quite overwhelming, not just from the affected mothers, of course, but like you said, ministers ramai yang berkata, termasuklah, our Minister of Law, Wan Junaidi, and several other ministers, including Wabirina, welcomed the decision. They said, this is high time, etc. And of course, I feel like for the first time in a really, really long time, we have members of parliament and Dons from across the board, from across party lines, who are supportive of the issue, who say, you know, well, yes, this is about time. It's ridiculous that Malaysia still discriminates against women on the basis for citizenship. Sepatutnya wanita diberikan hak yang sama seperti lelaki Malaysia. Tetapi I think the government has insisted to proceed with the appeal, and so, you know, clearly that is actually a question. Why they continue to insist on appealing the decision is something that really, I guess, you know, a lot of people are scratching their heads and asking why. So sebenarnya pada saya lah, logik tu mungkin tak ada logik pada saya. Because for me, at least, especially with the upcoming elections, this is an easy win, right? Like 50% of your electorate is women, and therefore, to give women equal rights seems to me like, especially for a government that seems to be running on the slogan Keluarga Malaysia, you know, sepatutnya kerajaan mendukung hak kesamaan wanita. Dan you know, recognize women as equal citizens and not as second-class citizens.
So, Rachel, with the Court of Appeal taking place on March 23rd, what would be some of the expectations that you have as an impacted mother regarding this issue?
I believe that the Court of Appeal will be ruling towards the mother's favors. I believe that they will agree that the citizenship law should be equal between men and women. However, because the government has appealed so many times and they have made so many attempts to stop the court from granting this equal right, I'm just a bit cautious not to get my hopes up. Yeah, so the government might still take it to the federal court, which I sincerely hope they won't. Yeah, but I'm preparing for the worst, to be frank.
This kind of expectation is actually quite sad and disheartening to hear. But I guess, you know, once bitten, twice shy does ring a bell in this story. Why do you feel that things might not work in your favor, Rachel? Wouldn't this be something of an optimistic outlook to look at? Or is it too bleak to expect, you know, things to go your way all the time? Because, you know, this hasn't been a story that is worth telling about when it comes to getting the things that you need for your child on this matter.
Yeah, I think as Suri just mentioned, like the appeals just didn't make sense at all. We don't understand why the government feels that there is a need to appeal, because all the facts and all the reason are really just very strong and suggesting that we can be equal, that there's no issue in granting equal citizenship rights to women as men. But I personally, I just fear, or rather I think that it is still a very patriarchal society, unfortunately. So I think a lot of the decisions may be driven by the patriarchal mindset that, you know, once women are married, you belong to your husband. So if your husband is not a Malaysian, then you and your children are not considered Malaysian anymore. So yeah, so that's quite common, quite frankly. And even in my social media, I've been advocating this issue in my social media, and a lot of comments, and you'll be surprised that people still believe that, you know, men are generally the head of household. They make all the decisions, so hence the children should follow the father's citizenship. While they don't really see the reality out there, it's really not the case. You know, women are contributing as much in a society and family nowadays as men. Like personally, I'm the breadwinner in my family, like even before I became a single mother. So to me, that doesn't hold. That argument doesn't hold. And yeah, and also the fact that a lot of women because of this issue, they're being trapped in toxic and abusive relationships that they couldn't get out of, because the children are following the father's citizenship, and if they can't bring the kids back home because they are not citizens. And even when it comes to court cases, it's complicated because the jurisdiction it doesn't work in our favor because our children are not Malaysians. Yeah.
All right. Let's try to bring this home right now in terms of how things are going to be panning out. Suri, maybe you can talk to us through some of the ideas that Family Frontiers have when it comes to moving this issue forward, irrespective of how the case turns up this March 23rd.
Well, I'm really glad you asked, because one of the things which sebenarnya is really, really important that I just didn't mention earlier was the fact that even though the government appealed the decision, the government did one other thing. It also applied for a stay of application, which meant that while we're waiting for the hearing at the Court of Appeal at the end of this month, the government said, well, we don't want to be obligated to implement the High Court decision in the meantime. But the Court of Appeal said, no, there's no reason why you should delay implementation. There's no reason why you shouldn't be issuing citizenship documents based on the High Court decision already. Kalau Family Frontiers kalah ataupun kalau hak memberi kewarganegaraan kepada anak-anak mereka sebenarnya ditarik balik dengan Court of Appeal decision contohnya, then you tarik baliklah citizenship documents, said the Court of Appeal, right? So between December and March, JPN or the government have been obligated to issue citizenship certificates to Malaysian mothers, impacted mothers. And so what happened was in late December, we took 3 out of the 6 of the mothers who were applicants on the case to JPN. Kita kata, okay, sekarang JPN has to issue the documents. Let's try this out and make sure that the mothers at least are issued some of these documents. Let's see. We want the government to walk the talk, right? And so what we did was we brought the mothers in late December and basically had our legal team issue letters notifying JPN that we were coming with the mothers, and it took them 2 months to process. At the end of February, when we wrote to them again, in February, they basically said, after our letter from the legal team, they said, come and collect the documents. And so we had 3 out of the 6 mothers go to JPN. Interestingly enough, kita ingat kan, the process would have been easy, but it wasn't, because we thought we'd just go there, collect the documents and come out. And our friends in the media were so kind because they came with us to, see what happened. And it turns out that when we arrived, the mothers were asked to wait. Despite a 3-hour wait, it turned out to be quite a historical day because, for the first time, the children of Malaysian mothers who were born abroad were issued citizenship documents. But those were the 3 applicants. And what we wanted to make sure is that it's not just the women who are applicants in the case that are being issued documents. We want to make sure that all mothers, like Rachel, and like a lot of the other mothers in our networks, are able to get citizenship documents, that we're able to see this process through, that it becomes a smooth process. And what we want is for all these women to have the right to confer citizenship on their children so that they don't have to accidentally get trapped in situations of domestic violence, so that they don't accidentally, get stuck in a situation where they can only afford, healthcare for one child instead of all of their children. Macam-macam lah masalah yang ibu-ibu ni have to face. So what we want to make sure is that women have this right and that they're not discriminated on the basis of gender when it comes to citizenship.
Rachel, a final word before we conclude this conversation. What would be some of your expectations and hopes and aspirations on this matter?
I hope that the government can do the right thing. I hope that they can see that it is really not an issue for granting equal rights to women in the citizenship law. And there are many, many mothers like myself, and many, many children are in the thick of this and is suffering day in and day out. So I hope that they can see that, and I hope that they can really, as Suri said, walk the talk, you know, uphold the Keluarga Malaysia aspiration, and then give our kids citizenship. As simple as that.
All right. We'll continue to keep an eye on this matter. In fact, I would like to invite Suriana back on the show to continue to with this conversation, but you know, and of course with you as well, Rachel. But we need to see what the decision is going to take place like, how the court story is going to be shaping up in the next coming few weeks. But for now, we'll put a pin on this. That was our conversation with Family Frontiers, Suriani Kempe, the president of Family Frontiers, as well as Rachel Ng, an impacted mother, on this story. You can read all about this story on AstroAwani.com. This has been a long-standing issue. We've been covering this for quite a number of years now, and most probably we'll still cover this in the years to come. That's my suspicion, at least. But the story needs to be discussed and talked about and debated, despite the lengthy nature of the matter, because if we stop talking about this, then this issue will never be resolved. That's how I look at it. Until then, thanks very much for watching, and goodbye.